Today we are going to talk. The topic of the day is going to be emergency preparedness, disaster resilience for individuals with disabilities in our community. And we're going to
Hello.
start.
Hello, everyone. I'm Christiana Abokian. I'm a nursing service supervisor for North LA Regional Center.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Dr. Margaret Swain. I'm the medical services supervisor.
Hi again, Roy Ortega. I do the emergency management over here at North LA Regional Center.
Good afternoon. My name is Sarah Yap. I'm the Consumer Services Manager for the School Age Department in the San Fernando Valley office.
And good afternoon, everyone. I am Marlene Pinotti. I'm the Consumer Services Supervisor for our adult unit in Santa Clarita. So before we get started, we'll review our agenda for this training. So through this presentation, we will review understanding emergency preparedness principles and terminology. We'll provide an overview of the basics of emergency preparedness and practical strategies for implementation per incident type. We will identify how to prepare for emergencies when living independently or in the family home and how to involve NLACRC in your planning. And we will review how to be emergency ready when it comes to your specific health and medical needs.
Thank you, Marlene. Thank you, everyone, for taking the time to be here. Again, Roy Ortega, and we're going to start off the presentation discussing emergency preparedness. So let's talk about what's going to be happening this weekend, which is heat, and what does heat lead to?
This message brought to you by FEMA. Fire is everyone's fight. We all have a role to play in making sure fires don't start. That's why the USFA invites you to join Fire is Everyone's Fight, to protect you and your family from the dangers of fire. A home fire is your most dangerous fire threat. Home fires kill and injure 16,000 Americans annually, and the leading cause of these fires is from cooking. So when you cook, avoid wearing loose clothing. Keep anything that can catch fire away from cooking surfaces. Turn pot handles in, and around cooking areas maintain a 3-foot kid-free zone. Smoke alarms can make the difference between life and death. Install them inside and outside sleeping areas and on all levels of your home. Alarms with long-life batteries are best. Change others every year. Test alarms monthly and replace smoke alarms that are more than 10 years old. Every second counts, so prepare and practice a home fire drill with your family. Learn more at www.usfa.fema.gov.
Okay, perfect. So let's think about emergency preparedness as life skills. I know the topic is a little scary for some. I know that when I first started this career, I was like, oh my God, emergency, what does that mean? Am I always gonna have to be on call? And I would get anxious. But we're talking about it like it's an everyday thing, because in fact, it is an everyday thing. So the question that I ask everyone is there someone in your household that is responsible for an emergency preparedness? Now, I can't see you, so I suggest, or I hope that you guys are putting your answer in the chat, or at least you guys are thinking about it. So we're going to go with an overview of what an emergency preparedness, the principles. So we're all used to generic everyday emergencies, like the picture that's here: an auto accident. What do I do? Who do I call? AAA, insurance company. But we also have electrical outages. We have plumbing problems at the house, and we're like, it's just an inconvenience, but it's still, is it an emergency? It might be at that moment, but we can survive. General repair or other types which are always inconvenient. Most of the experiences that we have or that we consider emergencies are via natural disasters at that scale or that we've lived in. So what happens when a disaster strikes? Who do you call? And no, the answer is no, we do not call the Ghostbusters. What is a natural disaster? It's or man-made. Now we have active terrorism, bomb threats. From there, you would escalate it into your county office of emergency management. You would always obviously call 911. For those of you that are lucky to be a homeowners, insurance companies, or your local fire authorities, the police department. Obviously, when it escalates to a different level, we go up all the way to the California Office of Emergency Services. For those of you that live in rural areas or tribals, we call the tribal emergency management agencies, or if it really gets to that extreme high level, we call FEMA for support. So we're talking about emergency preparedness and disasters. Why? Because they often happen to individuals with vulnerable populations. Vulnerable populations could be ethnic, could be racial, minorities, children, elderly. They're slower. It could be individuals that are pregnant, socioeconomically disadvantaged. So those are what we consider vulnerable populations. Okay. Also, decreasing mobility. I mentioned pregnancy. You're slower. You got to make sure you take up your extra life. If you're an elder individual or a person that uses a medical device such as a cane, such as a wheelchair, those type of individuals need more assistance. Exactly. Following on is transportation. Okay, if we need an evacuation plan or we need to get these certain individuals out, how do we do that? We need an additional vehicle. Those of you that may have suffered from that or may have those special needs, probably have this transportation lined up already. Also, specific health conditions or maybe even physical limitations require special needs shelters. I know that now they've adopted animal shelters for your emotional or therapy dog or pet. So let's just review the preparedness cycle. What is the life cycle? Everything has a life cycle. So if you notice the yellow asterisk, that's the event. It happened. When it happened, we can't do anything about it. Where we're at now and what we're doing today is discussing. It's a beautiful day outside. We call it a blue sky day, and we're doing preparation and prevention. We're talking about it. We're discussing of what we need to do to be prepared in case of this yellow asterisk. And then after that is a response. How do we resolve it? How do we fix it? And recovery at the end is like, okay, we're done. We're good. We're fine. And the mitigation, it's like, okay, we're ready. We survived. We can prepare for the next natural disaster. An emergency preparedness plan allows communities to what? Number one, to respond. We all in life have to have some kind of action plan. We have to be prepared. We here at North LA provide survival booklets that we can have all that in one place. So if you need one of those booklets, please feel free to reach out. The information and resources and links will come at the end, but we are here to help and support. Okay, an all hazards approach. Evaluate around our community, around our home. How are we going to be affected and how it will affect us? Coordinate, make friends, attend local fairs, local festivals. You'll get to know your emergency management agencies such as fire or police. And then this one booklet or this plan, it's where everybody talks, where it comes from the layman individual, just your person at home, to the person who's a first responder, to FEMA. So they're all in the same playbook. They all speak the same language. Okay. During natural disasters or emergencies, let's not forget that we also have HIPAA, which is the Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act. So we can't just be providing information out and about because it's your protected in personal information and we can't give it out. So we got to make sure that we abide by that. And we're bringing it up in the conversation here so we let you know that we are aware and we do not do that. We do not violate. Number two, so the overview of the emergency and disaster plan. We're going to discuss 5 takeaways, communication plans, a THIRA, which is a threat and hazard identification risk assessment, family or staff training, emergency preparedness exercises, and Everbridge notification. Okay, back to a question. Does your home have an emergency preparedness plan in place? I can't tell, but I hope you do, or if you haven't yet, you will start after today's presentation. Okay, a communication plan. Again, why is it important? It's important for us to have this in writing because it provides us phone numbers, it provides us contacts, it provides us detail that information that we probably won't be able to either have on demand during an emergency. Excuse me. During an emergency, what usually happens is that people freeze, they panic, or they fly, and they just are scrambled. So by having a communications plan set and ready, we can have this in case you need additional assistance. We can also provide this to social services or FEMA or whomever comes. And if you need a certain voucher, you will have all your information on one documentation that you can provide to this agency. Number 2, a THIRA. So we look at this and you're like, what is affecting my community? What is going to affect my house? What around me? Where I live, let's say I live in, for example, let's say Santa Clarita. I know that it's very dry out here. I know that it's a lot of mountains, a lot of vegetation. So it's like I have a high risk for fire. I mean, there could be explosions. There's some facilities out here, water spills. They could be terrorism. So that's where all the hazards find. Then assets. How is it going? Who is it going to affect, and how is it going to be of a hindrance? People, property. Will the Santa Clarita 14 or the 5 freeway be affected? What is my exit plan? How do I get to where I gotta get to? So all this has to be made aware and have to be all the vulnerabilities have to be made an analysis of. So this is an example of a risk assessment table. That's also at the end with the links and resources where you can take the time, write it down based on where your residence, and it'll give you a low, medium, or high probability and how it will affect you. Okay, emergency preparedness training. I refer to this as life skills. We all live here in Los Angeles, in the San Fernando Valley, Santa Clarita, and even Lancaster area. We are very city. We're very city folks. So I refer to it as life skills because if you're someone who does outdoor activities or goes camping, you will probably be more inclined to be able to do some life skills. But this is where we review all the information, all the trainings that we can get when we go out to the community, such as CPR, first aid. If you have people at the house, your own neighbors, your community watch, or of a CERT program, which is a community emergency response team. You can be involved in your own community so you can all help each other as a whole community approach. So what are the benefits of having this? It creates exercises. And I think the exercises should be done every 6 months, especially if you have individuals in the household, which are kids, which you can make it like a game, or adults, or individuals that just need extra support and extra guidance, because not every incident is going to be the same. An earthquake is not the same as fire. A flood is not the same as a power outage. So we have to be prepared. Okay. I mentioned here, participate in an annual full-size exercise or a tabletop exercise. Depending on the community that you live, there's going to be a flyer throughout the presentation at the end where Sylmar near Hanson Dam, because of the high equestrian, the horses, and the Hanson Dam area and high fire in Sylmar, they had a training there, which was awesome for the city. Okay, what is Everbridge and the understanding of its purpose? So Everbridge is a platform or a software program that we use here internally at North LA Regional Center, which allows us to do a mass communication warning or alert to our staff, to our consumers, and to our vendors regarding of any incident within specific community or throughout the whole. It could be as simple as they'll come to the office because they were having an air conditioning unit, or it could be as extensive as an evacuation is ordered in the La Tuna Canyon area. So please be aware. One key note I want to make sure that we're all aware of is at the bottom of the screen on the right-hand side, there is a question. It says, please reply with a 1 to acknowledge receipt of this message. A 1 usually means that you got it, that you're okay. And a 2 would usually say, I need additional assistance. And that would mean that either myself as the emergency management specialist would contact you, or your service coordinator would contact the consumer to make sure that you need additional support. Again, it's a whole community approach. So now, after what we've talked about and we've discussed and what we've seen in the community, if a disaster were to happen today, are we ready? Okay, so in the video, we talked about a fire. So what are the first things that we look for a fire? Obviously, call 911. Life safety is first. If you live in an apartment complex or a home, or you have multiple places, or you live somewhere, just make sure that you have an evacuation location, an exit plan. If something happens and you all get separated, where do you meet up? And then let people know about your communication plan, that you are safe, because news spreads fast. We have Twitter, we have social media, we have the news, we have the citizen app, the neighborhood app. There's so many ways that you can be notified of what happens. Also, don't forget, people and animals that are seriously injured should be transported for professionals' medical attention. And last but not least, let me stress, stay out of individual homes or places that are on fire. In case you forgot something, let it be. It's about life safety first. Do not go back. 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 Now let's discuss an earthquake safety video.
It's really important to be aware of the earthquake risk in your region, that you can have earthquakes even if you haven't had them, and you need to know what to do to protect yourself, how to drop cover and hold on, and other aspects of that safety. Great resources for earthquake information, what to do to be prepared to survive and recover are ready.gov/earthquakes, listo.gov in Espanol, shakeout.org for the Great Shakeout earthquake drills, and earthquakecountry.org for the 7 steps to earthquake safety.
All right, earthquakes, it happens. The last one that was major that happened here was in Northridge. Some of us had the chance or the memory to have experienced that earthquake. It was bad, it was horrific, but after that, we've been fortunate that we haven't. So the question is not if, but when. So here we have a little flyer that Callaway has put together. So it's about drop, cover, hold on. If you use a walker or a wheelchair, it's lock, cover, hold on. And then they suggest that you try to get to a wall that has no windows and try to cover yourself with the book. That way you cover your neck. Okay. One beautiful thing now that the state of California has done is that it has invested some monitors, which they track the shaking. So if something happens, let's say, for example, in Ojai, which is about maybe 35, 45 miles from where we're at now, which I'm in South Korea at the moment, it'll tell me there's an earthquake that happened in Ojai, and that'll give me about 30 seconds to an hour, 30 seconds to a minute, or at least I can expect something, because whenever there's an earthquake, there's always an aftershock. And this is amazing what the state has done now. Another key thing is public safety power shutoff, and I'll let the video discuss it.
SCE meteorologists and fire scientists continually monitor high fire risk areas in our service territory for high winds, low humidity, and very dry vegetation. Combined, these create the risk of an ignition from our equipment. Although our poles and wires are built to withstand strong winds, flying debris poses a major risk. Vegetation like palm fronds or branches, or objects like furniture covers can become airborne and hit our wires, ignite, and then fall to the ground near dead grasses. As the wind speeds get close to dangerous thresholds, we ask, do we need to turn off power to some customers to protect their neighborhoods? And what can we do to minimize the number of customers who lose power? Public safety power shutoffs are our tool of last resort. Our meteorologists map the weather. As with a hurricane, this information will get more exact as we get closer to the event. We discuss public safety issues with county offices of emergency management. We see if we can move customers to different circuits to keep them powered. Then we notify all customers who might be affected. If we can't reach our critical care and medical baseline customers who rely on life-saving medical equipment, we try to visit them. On the day of the event, we get readings every 10 minutes from more than 1,050 weather stations. We also gather data from our crews equipped with mobile weather units. We try to let customers know 1 to 4 hours in advance of when the wind will hit. In some cases, the wind comes up too quickly. And in other cases, taking close reads of the weather allows us to avoid shutting off power. When we look for fire risk, we look at the entire length of the circuit. There might be a fire risk at one end of the circuit, even though customers at the other end are in less windy areas. If we can, we shut off only parts of a circuit. When we get an all clear from our meteorologists, we patrol every circuit that was shut off. If we see damage, we will send out crews to repair it. Sometimes there is only a lull before winds will come back. If we can, we inspect the lines and turn power back on temporarily. We understand that shutting off power to reduce the risk of wildfires is a terrible inconvenience. But as the risk of significant wildfire has increased, we are taking this last resort measure to reduce this risk. To decrease the need for PSPS, we are also working to make our grid more fire resistant. For instance, we are replacing thousands of miles of bare wires with insulated wires that reduce fire risk and installing fire-resistant poles and fast-acting fuses. Thank you for your patience as we work together to keep our communities safe.
All right, well, thank you for that. So those of you that sometimes question and wonder, like, why is my neighbor's power on and mine is off? Well, that's it. Southern California Edison cuts off certain areas that could be in a high fire threat or wind situation to try to decrease fires, basically it. However, one key thing that they mentioned here was medical baseline. And medical baseline is, there's a link and a resource to it if you need it. If you have special medical devices that are needed, and you don't have a backup plan, or you do have a backup plan, you make sure you get on that list, because you never know when they're going to turn this power off. Okay, so after we covered everything, this is just one step further. If you're that eager beaver, or you want to say, what can I do better? It's called an after action report. You say, okay, what is the event that we're doing? What are we practicing for? What is our drill? How long did it take us to evacuate the house or apartment? Did we bring the go kit? Do we have everything we need? Have we rotated all the expired medication? And this is just, if you want to go above and beyond, it's an after action report. Perfect. Now I'm going to hand the mic over to my colleagues.
Thank you, Roy. So go ahead for the next slide. So what Marlene and I will be discussing, so keeping in mind the various emergencies you or your family may need to prepare for, the regional center and the individual program plan or IPP process should also be a part of your emergency preparedness planning, which we will be going over. Next slide. We will be discussing ways to incorporate emergency preparedness through your home, whether you are living independently or at home with your family. And some points to think about: does your household have a proper evacuation plan in place? If you do, have you shared it with your service coordinator? If not, how do you plan to put one together and implement it? Or do you need help coming up with one? Has your household created an emergency response team? Do you have a circle of support to help you in an emergency? And are they aware of their duties and responsibilities? And last, what kind of contingency or backup plan does your household need to consider itself ready for any disaster or emergency that comes up? So if plan A does not work or is not available, do you have a plan B? Thank you. Your regional center service coordinator is also a part of your emergency preparedness and planning. If you have an emergency plan, please share it with your service coordinator so it can be documented in the IPP. However, if you don't have a plan or need help, you can discuss your needs with your service coordinator. As part of North LA's plan for emergency preparedness, the regional center is required to identify who is your emergency contact, as your CSC will ask for their name, their phone number, their address, so they can be contacted in case of an emergency. Also, if you or your emergency contact have moved or changed contact information, such as your phone number or email, please make sure to update your service coordinator so our records can be revised.
So next we will discuss individuals that are living independently and steps that they can take to ensure that they're prepared in case of an emergency. Regional Center does fund services and supports that integrate emergency planning into their program designs, and those include Independent Living Services, or ILS, and Supported Living Services, or SLS. Some important emergency skills to consider when living on your own are: can you call 911? Can you get out of your home without assistance? Is there an evacuation plan? Have you practiced an earthquake drill? Do you have a trusted person to contact if you need help? And do you reside in a high-risk area, for example, fires, flooding, or frequent power outages? For individuals living independently, it is important to create a Go kit. And this is a kit that is readily available to take with you in case of an emergency. Here are 10 essential items to be sure to include in your emergency Go kit. Your emergency supply kit, of course. You'll also want to include an out-of-state contact list, cash and credit cards, important documents, including your social security card, driver's license, passport, medical card and records, and insurance information, a change of clothing for each member of the family, personal hygiene items, a toothbrush and toothpaste, shampoo and soap, lotion, deodorant, Kleenex and toilet tissue, any family photos. If there's a baby in the family, you'll want to be prepared with items for the child, including diapers, formula, food, and a change of clothing. Any special needs items such as wheelchair, canes, and walkers, medications, hearing aids with extra batteries. And if there's a pet in the home or any pets, also supplies to care for them, identification, immunization records, carrier or cage, muzzle and leash, and food and water. And it's also important to routinely check your emergency supplies to ensure that they have not expired or to replace those that may be outdated. Next slide, please. And next we will show this short video from FEMA on everyday preparedness.
No 2 days are alike. So every day, you prepare. For yourself, for those you love, for whatever the day may bring. Being prepared is a part of who you are. But in the case of a disaster, preparation isn't always front of mind. In an emergency, when help and resources may not be available for days, being prepared is more important than ever. It's up to everyone to be informed about what types of emergencies might occur where you live or visit. Knowing the best responses for your personal circumstances is the key to maintaining your health, safety, and independence. Make a plan that covers where you'll go in an emergency and how a personal support network can assist you. Build a kit that contains the specific things you need to survive for several days: food and water, medication and supplies, as well as any important documents you may need. Being prepared is a part of who you are, and disaster preparation is no different. There's no one more capable of planning for your situation than you. Be informed, make a plan, build a kit, get involved. Ready.gov/myplan.
So for individuals living in the family home, though you or the individual we serve have the support of family or relatives, it is still important that everyone is involved in planning for emergencies. Also, there may be some services that you're receiving that may incorporate emergency planning into their program and service. For example, for adults that we serve residing in the family home who may be receiving coordinated family services, part of their assessment process involves finding out if you are prepared for an emergency. If not, then this may be a goal that is developed as part of that service. We reviewed this for people living independently, but again, regardless of age, some emergency skills you and your family should consider. Again, can you call 911? Can you get out of your home without assistance? Is there an evacuation plan? Have you practiced an earthquake drill? Do you have a trusted person to contact if you need help, whether that's someone who also lives in the home or with you or outside of the home? Do you reside in a high-risk area where there may be increased chance for an emergency, such as fires, flooding, or power outage? Next slide. For our younger individuals still attending school, emergency preparedness drills are practiced annually on the school campus. This is also a good time to develop or review your plans that you have for the home. The more you practice, it becomes less scary and overwhelming for kids when the time comes if there is an emergency. If you need resources on how to prepare, local emergency preparedness fairs are often held and coordinated by your local government representatives during the year, and these are free to attend. These fairs are often publicized through mail or on social media, and at these fairs, often they offer free supplies and resources for your family, which can be another way to prepare for emergencies. Next.
The next section that we're going to speak about is taking what's been discussed by Sarah and Roy and Marlene one step further and just spending a little more time on your health and medical needs. Next slide. So when we're looking at emergency preparedness, it's very important to also consider your personal health care emergency plan and do a self-assessment. And this is so unique and individual to you. And some of the considerations that you need to think about are, what are your specific medical conditions that might impact your ability to evacuate or even remain in your home for a certain period of time during a disaster? What are your mobility needs? What special equipment and supplies do you need if you needed to evacuate or remain in your home without support? And what are your specific communication needs? These sorts of considerations are just some of the beginning points in a self-assessment that you should consider as you're looking at your own personal healthcare emergency plan. And this is something that you would discuss with your support team, your circle of support. This has been mentioned by Sarah and Marlene as part of the IPP planning, perhaps. And to remember that your support team can be not just your family or friends, but your neighbors and your case manager at North Los Angeles County Regional Center. But when we're also talking about healthcare needs, that in certain situations, it might be helpful to include your physician or your specialist or your nursing support team, to remember that considering health planning is important, and there are some health members that can be part of your support team as you start to do this self-assessment to be prepared for emergencies. Next slide. So we touched on Go Kits, and there are so many different checklists out there that are excellent, but I think when you're looking at health information that you need to include, you want to take it one step further and remember that you may have to provide emergency staff with hard copies of information around your medical diagnoses, your medications. You might want to have information as to how to contact your physician or your specialist, or perhaps your dialysis center if you're receiving dialysis. This sort of information takes it one step further and is part of that self-assessment as you're looking at all of your healthcare needs and what it is that you would want to have with you if you needed to either evacuate or provide this information to an emergency provider. And to remember to have hard copies of this information. And the reason for this is we all have information on our phone, but there are some scenarios where maybe we didn't have a backup battery or we weren't able to charge our phones, and we really want to be able to have a hard copy to access this information and be able to hand it off to an emergency provider as needed. So these are just things to consider to add to the Go Kit as well. Next slide. A great place to start, because this can all seem pretty overwhelming, is to use a checklist, to use some of the resources that are already out there and have been developed by a lot of different agencies. A great one that I found and our team uses is the California Health and Human Services Personal Planner. We have the PDF as a link in one of our resource files. And this kind of walks you through not only your personal information, but who can be called in the case of an emergency, but it goes into detail, a little more detail about healthcare needs, talking about who's your primary physician, listing your medications. Do you have any allergies? Well, also there's a section about medical devices, assistive technology, and any other needs you may have. And so this might be a great place to start with your support team or your circle of support to begin that planning around not only just overall emergency needs and contacts, but also taking it one step further in terms of your health needs and concerns specific to yourself. Next slide. So this has been touched on a little bit, but I want to take it one step further. If you were going through that checklist that we just referenced, this would be something that you would have to fill out. What is the medication? What's the dose and frequency? Does it need refrigeration? These things are important to just have with you to reference as needed, and for emergency providers to be able to see as well. And generally, when you're doing emergency planning around health, you want to think about life-sustaining medications or critical medications that you cannot be without, either for one dose or for one day, whatever it might be. And some examples of these might be insulin for diabetes. You really cannot skip a dose, or something critical around managing your seizure disorder. So you want to think about these life-sustaining medications that you really need to have on hand, and you cannot skip doses. And so the recommendation is to have at least 3 days of medications. You can have up to, people say 3 to 7 days, but at minimum 3 days. And, I know it can be hard to gather up these extra medications. So that's something that we recommend you work with your pharmacist or your physician to create this emergency supply, or just make sure you're refilling regularly, so you have 3 days of medications to take with you in case of an emergency. An important thing to remember is we think about our daily medications all the time, and we kind of have them accessible, but it's really important to remember to include our rescue or emergency medications, and maybe have extra of these in our Go Kits. And this can be something like your inhaler. Maybe you don't use it every day, and it's just for very infrequent respiratory concerns, but in the event of emergency, you may find that you need that, and you want to have that in your go bag. And same with things like an EpiPen. If you have life-threatening allergies, these are really critical medications that we may not take every day, but we want to make sure to include in our Go Kit. So just a little more information about medications when it comes to planning for these emergencies. Next slide. The next thing to really take some time as you're doing the self-assessment with your support team is to think about your medical devices, the medical equipment that you use daily and really need to be able to function. And asking the question, does this medical device require electricity or battery power? And is your wheelchair, does it require battery power? Does your oxygen and ventilator have a battery backup? These are some of the things that as you're doing your self-assessment with your healthcare team or with your support team, you really want to go through the list of all the devices that you use. Something that someone, you may not think about is if you have a communication device, do you have a backup battery for that? These are just these are just a few of the examples, and there can be a very long list depending on your specific needs. But this is just to remind you that we need to be thinking about these medical devices and what would happen if we had to evacuate or we didn't have electricity. Do we have our backup batteries? What would we do if we didn't have electricity for a few hours or for a few days? These are really important things to consider as part of our healthcare planning and that self-assessment piece. Next slide. Roy touched on this a little bit regarding, our electricity providers. One of the things that you should be considering if you have medical equipment that's dependent on electricity or battery is thinking about power planning. And if there is an outage, how would you manage that with the medical equipment you have? And so it can be, working with your durable medical equipment provider or the manufacturer of your specific equipment and finding out, hey, how long does my battery last? How do I get a backup battery? Thinking about trying to problem solve your specific needs and your specific medical equipment. Beyond that, working with your electricity company to make sure that you are in their medical baseline program, see if you qualify for that program, and also the resources that they have. Southern California Edison, we're going to provide a link for you, has a backup battery program where they look at your specific needs and your medical device needs and determine if you would qualify for that program. And so very important to consider this as part of your healthcare planning and with your support group, getting assistance and reaching out to these resources such as Southern California Edison and making sure you're on their medical baseline program if it's applicable to your specific needs. Next slide. The other thing to think about are your medical supplies. I know this was touched on with the preparation for the Go kit and the Go bag. Just taking this a step further, making sure you have your G-tube supplies, your catheters, incontinence supplies, your diabetic supplies. Maybe you have your insulin, but do you have your glucometer and some of the emergency medications that you might need around that? And so just this is all just to encourage you to think about your very specific healthcare needs and to begin to plan around that. Next slide. Another part of emergency preparedness that the team was talking about that might apply to some individuals is, do you have healthcare needs around communication, having a diagnosis that makes it hard for you to communicate? Do you have hearing concerns or some issues around vision concerns? Very important to think about this and consider this when you're doing your planning. Once again, a lot of us depend on our smartphones or assistive communication devices. Do we have a way to charge them or have a backup battery if it's an essential way for you to communicate? If not, something to plan. Now, what happens if for some reason our assistive technology devices or our smartphones aren't charged or we don't have access to them? Do we have a way to communicate with emergency responders? One of the recommendations that's commonly made is to have just some basic laminated cards with basic instructions around how you communicate, or if you need specific assistance with mobility or assistance with some of your chronic health conditions, just something to think about as you're planning. How would you communicate if you didn't have your smartphone, or how can we ensure that you do have your assistive technology devices? And of course, this was mentioned already, making sure you have some of those backup batteries for your hearing aid, or that you have some extra glasses or contacts or a cane if that's what you use. So really these slides and this section of the talk is really asking you to take it a step further when it comes to self-assessment, and really taking a moment to work with your team to identify your very specific health concerns as you're planning for emergencies. Next slide. And these are some of the resources and links that the team has come up with that you might find helpful. To our left, there's specific information relating to what Roy presented around fire safety and some of the very specific disasters that it can occur in our area, as well as some checklists prepared by FEMA. We also, on the right side, have a great resource from Listos, California, Disaster Readiness. They have a great site where you can click on specific disasters and how to prepare for them. And they also have some very good checklists and forms that you can use to help you prepare for emergencies. We also have some resource links for emergency preparedness from the Department of Developmental Services that you might find helpful as well. Next paragraph. Let me see, next slide. And these are just additional resources. Once again, Listos, California. This is another set of resources. The next link is that personal emergency plan that I referenced, that checklist that goes into a little more detail regarding medical needs and medical equipment that you might want to reference. We also have the ready.gov link here, which is nice because it has some short videos that reference individuals with developmental disabilities that have gone through emergency preparedness or have gone through certain emergencies that might be helpful. And then again, the link for the Southern California Edison Battery Program, if that's applicable to you. So hopefully some of these resources will help you either refine the planning that you've already done, or will help you get started as you begin to plan for yourself and your family. And that is the end of our presentations. And I think we're going to move on to questions next. Thank you.